Hi, my name is Mike. Thanks for joining me today on my channel, Technically Church, where I share over 20 years of experience in audio, video, lighting, and multimedia. You can always find out more on my website at technicallychurch.com. Let's jump in. I've got a pretty in-depth tutorial for you using DMX controllable pixel lights with MadMapper lighting software to control them. So I'm going to walk you through kind of my setup with the pixel lights and then kind of walk you through a step-by-step tutorial of setting up and programming those pixel lights with a Holiday Coro Alpha Pix brain, and then tying that into MadMapper software on my computer for building light scenes and controlling those pixel lights. So let's dive into the computer and I will show you what we got going on. So here's a picture of our stage. We're still in the build out phase, but we're nearing completion. So you can see here we've got strings of pixel lights, and then these white tubes are going to be pixel tape as well inside those tubes. So we've got all these strings of pixel lights, and then off to the side we've got a few more strands with some wood surrounding, just a different look there. Here's a wide view kind of most of the stage, and here's a close-up view of what those pixel lights look like. So if you've never worked with these, they're pixel lights from Holiday Coro, and I'll link all this down below. But they're kind of like Christmas lights as far as what they look like. You can get several different kinds from this company, but each individual light is DMX controllable RGB. So you have full control over every single pixel to put patterns and shapes and colors and all sorts of fun stuff on. So here's a close-up of the center stage. Again, some of this wiring needs to be cleaned up still. We're not completely done. We've got all these strands of pixels. So essentially how this works is in my configuration with the power supply that I'm running, you can plug in 100 of these pixels in a row directly off the brain. So the brain itself, I have 32 main outputs on that brain, and on each one of those 32 main outputs I can put 100 pixels, and then I'm using strands of 50 pixels, so in between each 50 you'll see here like this connector, I'm connecting two 50s together to get the 100, and then right here is where the 100 ends, and then a new one picks up, and I would clean up that wire obviously. So that's kind of the wiring aspect. Obviously you can take these pixel lights and do any shape that you want. I've just chosen this diagonal look. All right, so then I have charted out this very rough chart. So this is just the stage left half. And I've gone through, the red is the pixel tubes, and then the black lines are each of my pixel rows. I've charted out the direction of the data. Okay, so the data flows in one direction. And in a couple spots, it actually changes direction. So it's very important to note that. And I've done that just for ease of wiring. It could make more sense, but this makes more sense for wiring's sake. So here, the blue circle is where it starts, and it goes in this direction, and then it loops and loops and loops until you get to 100, and here's my endpoint. Let me zoom in a little bit here. So again, this blue here, the P19, is the start going in this direction, and it loops all the way to this E, the endpoint, and then I've got a new main run from the brain here at this blue circle, and it loops and loops and loops. So I've counted each row of pixels. So pretty much every one of my rows is different. So this row has 15, this row has 17, this row has 18, 20, 21, 23, 24. So obviously we were going for a shape. I've not made this easy on myself because this is going to be harder to program, but it fits the shape that we were looking for. So I've gone ahead and charted all this out because we're going to have to build this in MadMapper, and I'll kind of dig into how that works as well. All right, let's jump over to the Holiday Coro Pixel Brain, and I'm going to explain how this works. All right. So this is the Hinks Pix controller from holidaycoro.com. And once you set it up, I'm not going through all the basics on the brain itself. You give it an IP address, you put it on your network. Okay, so I'm using Artnet as my DMX transfer protocol. So I have this on my IP network. MadMapper is on the same IP network, so MadMapper needs to be able to see it. It all works over IP address, over Artnet protocol. So I've logged into the controller here, and we're going to go to port config, and I have ports 17 through 48 configured under my SPI ports. So these are my physical ports on the brain. You can get some long-range expansion from that company, but I'm not doing that. So I'm going to start with ports 17 through 32 under port config and kind of explain what's going on here. So essentially what we're doing is every port, every physical port on this brain, 17, 18, 19, 20, you tell it how many pixels are on each port. And like I mentioned earlier, based on the power supply that I have and the power consumption, I can put 100 on each. So I have 100 pixels coming out of each physical port. And this controller works based on channels. So you can see here, port 17, I'm starting with channel 1. There's 100 pixels on this channel, and it ends at 300. So each pixel requires 3 channels, which also translates to 3 DMX channels. RGB takes a channel each. So that's how this works. So you can see on port 17, channels 1 through 300, and I'll show you how this equates to DMX in a minute, because you have to correspond the controller channels to DMX channels. So they make it pretty easy up here. You would just type in that you have 100 pixels per port and hit set, and then hit auto calc start channels, and it will just figure all these numbers out for you. Now you do have some options here. If you're going to change your data direction, if you buy pixels that are not RGB order, you can change that here. And you can override the brightness here. Obviously, you can set your own brightness in your lighting software, but you could override, if you never want them more than 50%, you could set 50% here, and it would never let you go higher than that. So ports 17 through 32 are using channels 1 through 4800. And then I'm also going to use 33 through 48, so we're going to jump over there. And it just continues on. So you can see port 33 starts with channels 4801 through 5100, and all of these channels end at 9600. So we're just kind of doing a one-to-one channel. Each pixel takes 3. Okay, so that's all set up. Now we have to correspond these ports and these channels to Artnet universes. So I'm going to jump over to the Artnet configuration. And you can see at the top here, there's different protocols. Again, I'm using Artnet. And so we're going to, here's where we correspond the channels to the DMX universes corresponding to the DMX channels. So you can see on the right, all these green are my channels 1 through 8160. Currently, I only have 16 universes configured. So I could add a few more there. And then you can see that each set of channels correspond to a DMX universe and DMX channel count. So as you're probably well aware, the DMX protocol, each universe can only contain 512 channels. So essentially you have to break up all of the controller channels into DMX universe channels. So this is what this chart does. And again, it will figure it out for you. If you just type in, I'm going to use 16 universes, start at 1, and then you would put in 510 here. So DMX is 512. However, because we're using 3 channels per pixel, you have to divide 512 by 3. That doesn't work. So you can only use 510 of those 512 channels per universe. So you're going to type in 510 channels here, and it's going to map all this out. So you can see the channels on the controller are 1 through 8160, but then the DMX universes are broke by 510. So universe 1 has 512 channels, universe 2 has 510 channels, 510, not 512. But then you can see it starts corresponding differently to the controller channels. So if your brain isn't completely crazy at this point, trying to take all this in, I'll show you how I figured this out. So I have a chart, just a very simple Google spreadsheet that I built. And you can see here in the beginning, it's easy. So universe 1 corresponds, starts with DMX channel 1, which starts with controller channel 1. These increment by 3. So you can see if you scroll down, I can use 510. It starts at 508 and uses 509 and 510 as well. Channels in that DMX. So this is universe 1. DMX channel 508 corresponds with the controller channel 508. But then it jumps to universe 2. DMX 1 corresponds to controller channel 511. Increments by 3. So if we scroll down even further, you can see we're ending again with 508 DMX channels in universe 2, corresponding with controller channel 1018. Then we jump to a new universe, universe 3, DMX channel 1, controller channel 1021. So I've made this chart, and then I'll show you how this factors in when we're programming MadMapper. All right, so we're going to jump over to MadMapper now. And I'm not going to go through extreme basics of MadMapper. This would assume you know a little bit, but just the super quick basics. If we go to preferences in here, how we're connecting MadMapper to the Holiday Coro brain is under DMX output in preferences, and we're going to obviously want to communicate over Artnet. And I have multiple networks, so my Artnet network is what I want to choose. That's what this machine is on, and that's what that Holiday Coro brain is on. I've also got internet, obviously, but that's a separate network. So we're making sure that my Artnet network is selected. It defaults to 44 frames per second. We can just leave that. And then we're going to want to check use unicast. All right, so then down here, I just manually added, so my Holiday Coro brain is IP 10.1.1.100. So you can see all these here. So you just click the plus, you type in the IP. The IP is the same for the brain every time. And then you just correspond with how many universes you're going to use. So you can see it's all 100. This is all the brain. And then universes 1 through, currently I have 11 in here. We'll see how many I need. I can add more. So that corresponds to the Artnet universes that you just set up a few minutes ago on the Holiday Coro brain side. All right, this .2, I also have a real DMX lighting controller on this network, and that's what that .2 is. So we're not dealing with that today. All right, so I have all of these universes set up that match the Holiday Coro setup brain in MadMapper. So I'm going to cancel out of here. All right, so on my left side here, I'm in the fixture editor. I run some of my normal lights, so like my front lighting, my house lighting are actually in here, so that's what some of this is. We're just going to deal with my pixel light folder here. And here's how this kind of looks. I'm going to set a black color just so we can see. So we're going to draw every one of those pixel lines and correspond it to an actual DMX address. So the first thing we have to do is we have to make a fixture. It's essentially making a light fixture for each one of those pixel lines that I showed you here. So each one of these is, like I said, is different. Some of them are the same. This one's 15, this one's 17, 18, 20 pixels long. So you literally have to kind of make a light fixture for each one of those. So under scenes and cues, I'm going to click that and go to fixture editor. And I've already made a lot of these for you. So you can see here, Fox 7, 8, I just named these, myself. Fox 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. So these all correspond to the length of those pixel fixtures. So I'm going to add 2 more just to see the process. So I'm going to click add here because I need 2 more, and I'm going to call this one Fox 31. And then, so over here, the pixel width is 1. And the pixel height is 31. So that's going to make your one string line of 31 pixels. Pixel type is RGB, pixel size is 3. So we're just going to leave that alone. And then we're going to add one more at Fox 32. Again, you can name these whatever you want, but this one is 1 by 32. So that's a 32 length pixel strand. All right, so I have these more or less literal light fixtures now that I have available to add into my scene. Okay, so I'm going to jump back to scenes, and I'm going to make this a little smaller. All right, now what we're going to do is make our first pixel line. So in our group, this is just for organization here. I'm going to click this plus fixture line, and you see here it has actually made a fixture. Now, the arrow right here is the data direction, so that's what's important. So this width, because it's only 1 pixel wide, doesn't matter. If you were doing a more complicated setup and wanted to, like a big block like this, this would matter. So this width doesn't matter. I'm just going to make it wide enough so we can see it. And I'm just going to position it. So I'm going to just start by positioning it up and down, and then we'll create the diagonal when we're done. All right, so there is one of my pixel lines, okay? So if I click on it, I see the arrow, the data direction is going this way. That is important. I'm going to now duplicate this. And I'm going to reverse the direction, because the way that I strung my pixels is, you know, kind of up, down, up, down, up, down. So I'll show you how this looks in a second. So I'm just going to kind of do this. So now we have one that goes up and we have one that goes down. We're going to configure these when I'm done building it, but I'll explain in a minute. So we have an up and a down. So now I'm just going to keep copying and pasting these to create my sections. So I have 8. So if we jump back real quick at this, in between each of my red pixel tubes, I have 8 pixel lines. So I'm going to go ahead and just duplicate these one at a time and alternate the up downs. So I'm just duplicating each of these and moving them over. Oops, so that's I got a little out of place there, but all right. So snap is on, so you might notice it's snapping a little weird. All right. Okay. Up, down, up, down, up, down, up, down. All right, so now we have 8 of those. And then for each of my other sections, I could just select this whole thing, copy and paste it, and move that over. So now I actually have 4 sections. Obviously, I'm only going to do 2 at this exact moment. So I have 16 lines. Okay, so now we just have to configure each one. So if we go over here, I'm going to start with this section here, starting with this blue P19. So I need to configure them 15, 17, 18, 20, 21, 23, 24. So we'll start with 15, 17, 18. So now I'm just going to click on them individually. Down here where my fixture library is, you just choose the pixel length. So 15, 17, 18, 20, 21, 23, and 24. 20, 21, 23, 24, Oh, this section only has 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay. So we're just going to delete that one for now. All right, so now each one of these is the correct length of pixels. And then you would repeat the same thing for all these. Okay, so then the only next step is to actually address them. So back here, this is just where I've chosen to plug it in, right? So I made my own chart here, and I plugged this specific line into port 19. So port 19, if we go back to that Holiday Coro brain, I'll show you how this all comes together now. All right, so we're going to go to port config. We're going to find port 19. Port 19 starts at channel 601. So then I go back to my spreadsheet, and I find channel 601 right here. So I'm just going to say port 19 start. This is just my notes. So channel 601 corresponds to universe 2 DMX 91. So now we go back to MadMapper, and down here, universe 2 channel 91. So that addresses the first pixel light in this chain as universe 2 channel 91, and then it will auto increment 15 pixel lights of DMX channels. So then we're going to start with it. So you just have to set the starting address of each line. All right, so that is 15 long. So if we go back to the chart, (15 pixels times 3 is 45 channels. So if we go 601 plus 45 channels, we're looking for channel 46, 646. This would be the next line start. Channel 646 is where the next line starts, corresponds to universe 2, channel 136. So we'll go back over here, click on the second line, universe 2, 136. 136. All right. So now these two channels, or 2 pixel rows, are set up, addressed, the whole thing, and you would actually be able to turn them on and use them. So you would just repeat this process for every single one of those lines, configuring the fixture length, mapping the channels, where you plugged it into the brain, map that to a channel, map that channel to a DMX number, and program that in here. Then once you were done with all that, obviously if you wanted it to look correctly, you could just simply turn this like this and build out all the rest. All right, so now that you have everything built out, just a super quick little tutorial on how you actually get it to work in MadMapper if you don't know the software. So I have my pixel lights grouping, so I can just apply a pattern or a color to the whole group, or I could do it individually to each line. So I'm just going to show you how to apply a color to this whole group. So I'm going to select that whole group. You can see it's selected here. And then over on the right, you have your generators. So at the very top, you have your solid colors, you have your color patterns, and then below that are all your patterns. Okay, and then at the very bottom, you can add in more patterns. So I could add this dunes pattern here. So as long as that's selected and I click that little play button on the dunes pattern, you can see this cool purple pattern is now playing across those pixels. So it's only going to light up the pixels where the purple is. That pattern will be going across them. Down here at the bottom of this window, you can control the parameters of the pattern. So the scale, the speed, the color, the brightness. Some of them have color over here and some don't. And then on this left side is where you control the brightness, the opacity here, and you also have a color over here to control those pixels. Once you get them the way you want, down here at the bottom, you can set scenes. So again, because I'm using, my house lights are in here, my front lights are in here, my pixel lights are in here, I may only want to save a portion of this into a scene. So I'm going to click my pixel lights with the pattern going. And then down here under cues, I just pick an open box, right click, add to queue, selected surfaces and fixtures. So now I have this Q1, which has now saved that scene, and I could label this Purple Dunes and give it a fade time of 3. So I'm going to activate my lights all off, and then my purple dunes, and you can see now they're back and they're activated. So that's just a quick tutorial of how you get a pattern or a color on those pixel lights and save it into a scene. So hope this walkthrough wasn't too crazy or too fast. I just wanted to kind of document what that looks like using the Holiday Coro pixel lights that are DMX controllable, which is a super cool feature, using that with MadMapper lighting software to get the whole thing to actually work. Thanks for joining me today. Again, my name is Mike. You can always find out more on my website, technicallychurch.com, or on my YouTube channel, Technically Church. Look forward to seeing you soon.